So I want to address the elephant in the room, and the elephant seems to come back once every year or so. The elephant will just wander into the room. I hear this like on a recurring basis, like once every 18 months or so. It kind of seems like this cyclical thing that just keeps coming back like a long-lasting tide. And that's this idea of, is MDM dead? I keep going to conferences, or I will talk to other analysts, or I'll talk to pundits. I'll look on LinkedIn and I'll hear, oh, well, MDM is dead. It's like, oh, faceplant. Really? Here we go again. I'm bringing this up because I was at a conference in early December 2022 in Washington, D.C. And this was basically said in a certain way in one of the keynote speeches. And I'll be honest, it's a pet peeve. Not because I work for an MDM provider, not because I'm kind of pro MDM, and I do. I work for an MDM provider, and I'm obviously bullish on the value of master data management. It's not a pet peeve for those things. It's a pet peeve because I think it's really short-sighted, and it's a pet peeve because, especially when it comes from pundits or analysts or other people who are supposed to be in the business of sharing best practices. Because I think that saying, "Oh, MDM is dead," is kind of tantamount to malpractice, and I'll tell you why. One of the reasons why I think that this keeps coming around, and it keeps coming around and coming around and coming around. There's a few reasons to explain why. One, MDM programs, the failure rate remains high. MDM can be difficult, particularly operational styles of MDM. It can be disruptive because often you're asking the business to change how they operate. You're asking the business to change how they onboard customers or suppliers or process invoices or whatever, right? And operational MDM can be disruptive. All of these things lead to MDM can be relatively high risk. There's a few other things as well that kind of lead to this. I think MDM is often confused, or it's commingled with this idea of a single version of the truth. And I'll hear these things said interchangeably. I'll hear, oh, MDM is dead. And then I'll say, well, the single version of the truth is dead. These things are all dead. And I understand kind of the concerns related to single version of the truth, because I've been that guy in the conference room that had the 2-day offsite, where I brought everybody into a room and where we squabbled for 2 days straight about creating a single definition for customer, right? Basically, what we were trying to do is align in a single version of the truth, and it never works. It never works. So I think that some of that frustration and companies trying to do it and having it fail, I think some of that frustration leads people to say, well, single version of the truth is dead, and MDM equals single version of the truth. So these things, they're both dead. MDM must be, and single version of the truth must be. Because it's hard. And it also leads, I think, a lot of focus on things like the data mesh. This seems like the new shiny thing of the day, where it's, oh, well, just go let the domains figure it out. Go let individual domains and product managers in the domains figure that stuff out, because MDM is hard and single version of the truth is hard, and it really doesn't meet the business needs anyway. So all of these things kind of bundle together, and it leads industry pundits and other people who say they're focused on best practices to say things like MDM is dead and single version of the truth is dead, when the truth is a lot more nuanced than that. It's a lot more nuanced than that, and the reason why is because I'll phrase it in a story. And I've learned this through the School of Hard Knocks, and this is why I'm sharing this with you today. Try to tell, if your CEO asks the question, how many customers do we have? And you're a CDO, or you're a vice president of data and analytics, or you're even senior manager of data analytics, and you're asked this question, you better be ready to have one answer. So for that use case, and in that situation, for that CEO wanting to know how many customers do we have, there is a single version of the truth for that CDO, for that context. And the same is true with a senior director of marketing, or senior director of compliance, or a SVP of procurement. For each of them, there will be one answer. There will be a single version of the truth in essence. We can hair split about whether it's one record, 2 records, doesn't matter. But for those business leaders and what they care about, there is still a single version of the truth. And good luck to you if you try to answer that question from your CEO of when he or she asks, well, how many customers do we have? Good luck to you if you say a response of, well, that depends. Because I've tried that. I've tried it and it doesn't work. It doesn't lead to job stability. These things I can tell you from personal experience. So you better be ready to have one answer. That sounds an awful lot like a single version of the truth to me, right? So yes, business is evolving to the point where there can be multiple answers to that question based on context and based on who in the organization is asking and what level of the organization are they asking. Right? Yes, our technology has evolved to the point where we can have different answers to one question based on who is asking. And that's a really, really good thing. But I'll lead you to kind of key point number 2 here. Another thing that just kind of drives me nuts when people glibly say, oh, MDM is dead and single version of the truth is dead. We can acknowledge that context matters, and it does matter, and it's important. And we can acknowledge that you can have different answers to the same question. Those things can both be true. But we can also acknowledge a hard truth that I see every day when I'm talking to data leaders, and I saw every day when I was a Gartner analyst for almost 3 years, talking to over 1,500 data and analytics leaders. That hard truth is that most companies struggle with governance. So it's easy to say, you can have multiple versions of the truth and multiple answers to the questions of how many customers do we have, but you better be prepared to have a data governance organization and a level of data governance maturity that allows you to have all the business rules for those multiple answers. Because if you want to have multiple versions of the truth, depending on the context, okay, great, that's fantastic. That means you need to have multiple sets of business rules defined and managed and stewarded and implemented. And does your governance model support that? Does your governance level of maturity support that? Are you ready to go from one set of business rules, which is hard enough for most companies, by the way, one set of business rules to define customer, supplier, vendor, product, asset, location, one set for each of those domains, one set for each of those use cases. Now, all of a sudden, you have N sets of business rules. Are you ready to do that? Are you ready to have 10 sets of business rules defining customers and customer relationships and customer hierarchies and suppliers and locations and assets and people? Are you ready to do that? Chances are the answer is you're not. So next time you hear somebody say, oh, MDM is dead and single version of the truth is dead, the technology exists for us to evolve to multiple versions of the truth. This is true. However, depending on who is asking, there is really only one answer for that individual use case, for that individual report, for that individual stakeholder. There's really only one answer here. So be careful how you position the death of the single version of the truth. And if you are pushing beyond that, if you are evolving to the point where you want to have the flexibility to have multiple answers to the same question, and you think that your technology can support it, you think your organization support it, you better have a data and analytics governance maturity who can also support it, meaning investments in governance, investments in stewards to go from one set of business rules to multiple sets of business rules. That's a lot of work, guys. That is a lot of work. Most companies struggle with one, but maybe you're the exception where you can have 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of business rules managed as a part of your governance, program. So I'll stop ranting. This is my way of saying we can have multiple versions of the truth. You need to be careful about how that's positioned within your organization. You need to be absolutely certain that you do have a single answer for your CEO, for your CFO, for your SVP of procurement, for your SVP of sales and marketing. You need to have a single answer for each of those people. And you need to have all the business rules correctly and accurately and consistently defined for those answers. So MDM's not dead. Single version of the truth really isn't even dead. There's a lot of nuance here. And when you hear people at conferences or analysts or other people say, oh, well, MDM is dead and single version of the truth is dead, remember, it's probably not dead. You need to have a single answer for each of those use cases that I was talking about. You need to have a single answer to your CEO and to all of those other stakeholders because it's still relevant to them. Context does matter, but you need to have data and analytics governance maturity to allow you to manage multiple contexts. And if you don't, that's going to be a challenge. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up. That's enough for today's episode of MDM Bytes. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys, and look for another episode from me on this issue and other issues like it shortly.